Through the opening an arm was passed to find the fastening, then a second, the window turned on its hinges, and a man entered. He was alone. "That's a daring rascal," whispered the Count. At that moment Ali touched him slightly on the shoulder. He turned. Ali pointed to the window of the room in which they were, facing the street. "I see," said he, "there are two of them, one does the work while the other stands guard." He made a sign to Ali not to lose sight of the man in the street, and turned to the one in the dressing room. The glass cutter had entered, and was feeling his way, his arms stretched out before him. At last he appeared to have made himself familiar with his surroundings. There were two doors. He bolted them both. When he drew near to the bedroom door, Monte Cristo expected that he was coming in, and raised one of his pistols, but he simply heard the sound of the bolts sliding in their copper rings. It was only a precaution. The nocturnal visitor, ignorant of the fact that the Count had removed the staples, might now think himself at home, and pursue his purpose with full security. Alone and free to act as he wished, the man then drew from his pocket something which the Count could not discern, placed it on a stand, then went straight to the secretary, felt the lock, and contrary to his expectation found that the key was missing. But the glass cutter was a prudent man who had provided for all emergencies. The Count soon heard the rattling of a bunch of skeleton keys, such as the locksmith brings when called to force a lock, and which thieves call nightingales, doubtless from the music of their nightly song when they grind against the bolt. "Ah, ha," whispered Monte Cristo with a smile of disappointment, "he is only a thief." But the man in the dark could not find the right key. He reached the instrument he had placed on the stand, touched a spring, and immediately a pale light, just bright enough to render objects distinct, was reflected on his hands and countenance. "By heavens!" exclaimed Monte Cristo, starting back, "it is." Ali raised his hatchet. "Don't stir," whispered Monte Cristo, "and put down your hatchet, we shall require no arms." Then he added some words in a low tone, for the exclamation which surprise had drawn from the Count, faint as it had been, had startled the man who remained in the pose of the old knife grinder. It was an order the Count had just given, for immediately Ali went noiselessly, and returned, bearing a black dress and a three-cornered hat. Meanwhile Monte Cristo had rapidly taken off his greatcoat, waistcoat, and shirt, and one might distinguish by the glimmering through the open panel that he wore a pliant tunic of steel mail, of which the last in France, where daggers are no longer dreaded, was worn by King Louis XVI, who feared the dagger at his breast, and whose head was cleft with a hatchet. The tunic soon disappeared under a long cassock, as did his hair under a priest's wig. The three-cornered hat over this effectually transformed the Count into an abbé. The man, hearing nothing more, stood erect, and while Monte Cristo was completing his disguise had advanced straight to the secretary, whose lock was beginning to crack under his nightingale. "Try again," whispered the Count, who depended on the secret spring, which was unknown to the picklock. "Clever as he might be, try again, you have a few minutes' work there." And he advanced to the window. The man whom he had seen seated on a fence had got down, and was still pacing the street, but, strange as it appeared, he cared not for those who might pass from the avenue of the Champs-Élysées or by the Faubourg Saint-Honoré. His attention was engrossed with what was passing at the Count's, and his only aim appeared to be to discern every movement in the dressing-room. Monte Cristo suddenly struck his finger on his forehead and a smile passed over his lips, then drawing near to Ali, he whispered, "Remain here, concealed in the dark, and whatever noise you hear, whatever passes, only come in or show yourself if I call you." Ali bowed in token of strict obedience. Monte Cristo then drew a lighted taper from a closet, and when the thief was deeply engaged with his lock, silently opened the door, taking care that the light should shine directly on his face. The door opened so quietly that the thief heard no sound, but, to his astonishment, the room was suddenly illuminated. He turned. "Ah, good evening, my dear M. Caderousse," said Monte Cristo. "What are you doing here, at such an hour?" "The Abbé Busoni!" exclaimed Caderousse, and, not knowing how this strange apparition could have entered when he had bolted the doors, he let fall his bunch of keys, and remained motionless and stupefied. The Count placed himself between Caderousse and the window, thus cutting off from the thief his only chance of retreat. The Abbé Busoni, repeated Caderousse, fixing his haggard gaze on the Count. Yes, undoubtedly, the Abbé Busoni himself, replied Monte Cristo. And I am very glad you recognize me, dear M. Caderousse. It proves you have a good memory, for it must be about 10 years since we last met. This calmness of Busoni, combined with his irony and boldness, staggered Caderousse. The Abbé, murmured he, clenching his fists, and his teeth chattering. So you would rob the Count of Monte Cristo? Continued the false abbé. Reverend sir, murmured Caderousse, seeking to regain the window, which the Count pitilessly blocked. Reverend sir, I don't know, believe me, I take my oath. A pane of glass out, continued the Count, a dark lantern, a bunch of false keys, a secretary half forced, it is tolerably evident. Caderousse was choking, he looked around for some corner to hide in, some way of escape. Come, continued the Count, I see you are still the same, an assassin. Reverend sir, since you know everything, you know it was not I, it was La Carconte. That was proved at the trial, since I was only condemned to the galleys. Is your time, then, expired, since I find you in a fair way to return there? No, reverend sir, I have been liberated by some one. That some one has done society a great kindness. Ah, said Caderousse, I had promised. And you are breaking your promise, interrupted Monte Cristo. Alas, yes, said Caderousse very uneasily. A bad relapse, that will lead you, if I mistake not, to the Place de Grève. So much the worse, diavolo, as they say in my country. Reverend sir, I am impelled. Every criminal says the same thing. Poverty. Pshaw! Said Busoni disdainfully, poverty may make a man beg, steal a loaf of bread at a baker's door, but not cause him to open a secretary in a house supposed to be inhabited. And when the jeweler Johannes had just paid you 40,000 francs for the diamond I had given you, and you killed him to get the diamond and the money both, was that also poverty? Pardon, Reverend Sir, said Caderousse, you have saved my life once, save me again.